Portions of this show are recorded. Strap in and be prepared.
You just heard Baby J about 3 minutes give his entire A to Z on what was going on. I didn't interrupt you.
I don't even like I got to everything, honestly.
No, you didn't get to everything.
Interesting guests.
Kelly Graves, Mike Parker, Josh Pate, Melissa Lombardi, Yogi Roth, who said that Justin and I are smart.
Sharp opinions.
I think Dan Lanning's sitting in his office going, you know what, fine, give us the toughest road to win the national championship. That's what it should be.
I think that this team is going to go as far as Malik Murphy takes them. There's a lot to like about this offense if he's who we think he could be.
And some smiles.
Is this thing on?
Is this thing working? No, that's why you got to do this. You got to go.
Hello?
Hello? Testing, testing,
it's like the little
testing.
girl in Nemo where she's tapping on the glass.
Fishy! Fishy, wake up, Fishy!
It's Danny Havel.
We have to be more specific. We have a lot of pickle things going on, apparently.
Justin Grossweiner.
I've been wrong before, but that's what I think.
Danny and Justin starts now on Fox Sports Eugene and Newport. Danny's taking a day off for load management. Here's Justin.
Hello. Neighbors. High atop the Delta Triad in the Crystal Palace, that is the Bigfoot Beverages Studios. It is the Danny and Justin radio program. And we have a very special guest host today sitting across from me.
Now, when you say special, what kind of special are you talking about
Special
here?
in a good way.
Okay.
I mean special in a good way because the listeners get a peek into our off-air conversations we have very often.
Quite a bit.
We do. We have some good conversations. The listeners get to hear it today. Woody is stepping in for Danny and Goose today.
That's right. I'm the C team.
The C team. I don't know about the C team. I think that you're the old vet that comes in. You know, you're man, I'm forgetting
Are you saying I'm Joe Flacco? Is that
well, Joe Flacco is a Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I'm trying to remember Barry Alvarez. You're like Barry Alvarez who comes in after like 5 years of not coaching for Wisconsin against Auburn in I forgot which bowl game it was, but they win that game after like 5 years. So you're coming out of retirement.
Now's when you need that Bill Walton clip about I'm sorry about ruining your broadcast.
I don't have it. But no, it's good to have you here, and it's a pretty good week to have you on.
So how much did Danny pay you to do the Hello Neighbors?
None.
None. He didn't bribe you.
Pro bono.
Okay.
Yeah. No bribes. Just simply the consistency.
Nice.
was what was sought after. So no Danny today, no Steve Mims, Justin and Woody here on Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport, the Danny and Justin radio program. We have a fun show today. Ryan Harlan from Beavers Edge will join us at 2:20. Tomorrow, I want to detail some things going on this week. Tomorrow, Kerry Eggers is going to join us. He's author of 10 books and a Heisman voter. He covers the Beavers. And then Audrey Snyder, who covers the Nittany Lions. She's formerly with The Athletic, does independent work now. She does great stuff. She's also going to be with us tomorrow, so a really packed show tomorrow. Thursday, Yogi Roth will be here with us.
Yogi's the man.
Yogi is the man.
He's awesome.
We love Yogi. He'll be with us here on the Danny and Justin radio program on a Thursday. And then Friday, Danny's going to be here. We're going to be out at Laurelwood. Big Bets is happening. So Friday's a big show, obviously, right before the big Penn State game. And then Houston is actually happening that night for Oregon State. So Friday's going to be a big one. And then also happening here in Eugene is a big high school football matchup, which is going to be Willamette and Sheldon, which is happening this week. So that's going to be a super fun one. So this is a really good week for sports here in Eugene and in Oregon in general. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, this is a great time to be a sports fan, a great time to be living here and being a sports fan.
Exactly. No, it is. And one place it's not maybe necessarily quite as great time living is in Oklahoma State right now. So I want to give one last, I'm a man, I'm 40, for Mike Gundy, who got fired today.
I'm 40.
We'll try that one more time.
I'm a man. I'm 40.
Well, isn't he like 55 now?
I think he's somewhere around there. Mike Gundy, let's check what his age is.
I'm a man. I'm 55.
He's 58.
58.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a timeless clip?
Well, when he came, it was interesting when Oklahoma State came to Oregon. Pre-game, he was actually like spending time with. He actually stopped and took pictures with Oregon fans.
Well, Brian Beban, our co-host on Friday Night Live and on Game Day on Saturday, his son was basically yelling that at him as he was walking by, and he came over and took a picture with him in response to him yelling that. Like, he obviously embraced it and kind of understood what was going on. So I think he had a good kind of attitude about it, and not super surprised to see him fired just overall, but a little bit surprised to see it happening in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I would have thought that with an entirely new staff, they would have given him at least the season instead of, just a couple of games, because it's hard to go through that much of a staff change and that much of a roster change and be productive, especially early on. And, there has to be other reasons, but,
sure,
that's, and it's the Kermit the Frog meme, drinking the tea. That's not our problem.
Yes, no, definitely not a problem here in Eugene. So I think that the other thing with them is that it just like they all the transfers they had this season. He kind of embraced the new way of college football, maybe a little bit too late, where you have a team that's coming together, so quickly. It's just it's hard to do.
Anytime you have that big of a roster turnover, ask Deion Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anytime you have that big of a roster turnover, or Belichick too. You've turned over 3/4 of your team. It takes a while to build a chemistry and continuity, and they just weren't patient.
And I completely agree, and that goes to back what you said about there might be something else going on behind the curtain here.
You have to think there is a little bit.
Yeah, the timing seems a little bit weird.
Yeah.
So, but big game here, not in Eugene, but out at State College.
Yes.
The whiteout. So just initial thoughts on this game. First time hearing from you about this game on the air. Just like, what are your feelings about it? Like, do you have a sense of it's going to be going either way?
Well, this game, I've been saying to others off air, this game is the game where I think we will find out really who we have as a Ducks team. Mm-hmm. Honestly, Oregon hasn't really played high-level competition so far. Neither has Penn State. And so this is the week. Now, there's concerns with some people like, is Oregon's run game soft? We don't really know.
No.
Because situationally, who did they have in? What were they doing? You just can't make that kind of a judgment. But there won't be any excuses after this game.
No.
Is over.
No.
And I think that it's natural grass. Oregon normally practices on turf. I think Penn State's going to let that grass grow just a little longer. Uh-huh. And, it's going to take a lot longer cleat, and they're going to get the advantage of practicing in that all week. Well, in 2 weeks, because they've had a bye week, an additional advantage. They've had a bye week to get ready for this game.
Do you think it's an advantage? Because that's something Steve
Absolutely.
and I talked about yesterday, and I brought that up, and he kind of was devil's advocate to me about it, because that's an extra week to prepare for one team. I get it both ways. His argument was you're getting another game in there to get live reps. Like, I kind of get it, but I'm sort of with you. I think it's an advantage.
From the live rep standpoint, it's nice to keep playing. But from a coach's film and preparation standpoint, that extra week can allow you to find something on tape that you could exploit that you wouldn't be able to do normally in a 3-4 day cycle to get ready for a game.
Well, and just looking at from James Franklin's perspective, he actually talked about how he was glad that Oregon and Oregon State game, now it wasn't super competitive very long, but he was just glad that it stayed as long as it did.
We were able to get some film. Obviously, Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Oregon State. I know, kind of being on the road, me and Danny O'Brien were just talking about, we were hoping that Oregon State game was as competitive for as long as possible so that we would have as much film to watch.
And I think they got that. That's, I guess, what the advantage would be, to get that other game to watch a little bit of film. And I think that Oregon State in that first quarter was maybe as competitive as anybody's been with the Ducks this season so far.
You have to give them credit. They came out with a lot of fire. They just couldn't sustain it. They don't have the bodies. And I think that you're looking at a situation in years past, you have fans, and just talking from the fan perspective, that complain in the early part of a season in the non-conference schedule where a team doesn't show a lot.
Sure.
They don't want to get a lot on tape for other teams to see. This year, to me, at least my perception, it was the opposite. Oregon was throwing all kinds of different formations and a lot of different looks. maybe requiring Penn State to really have to look at a lot more than they usually would, and then potentially narrowing down their game come Saturday.
Well, let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
All
what
right.
does James Franklin see in the Oregon offense?
They're multiple is the best way I would describe. Multiple personnel groups, multiple tempos, multiple schemes. They're able to run the ball with power. They're able to spread you out as well.
But guess who the player that he points out first as the player that he thinks that makes this team go? Do you have a guess?
Hill.
It is not.
Okay.
I think the tight end really makes them go. Obviously with what we were able to do with Tyler Warren last year, they're getting that out of their tight end position. He's a matchup problem in the pass game. He's physical in the run game, extremely explosive.
Sadiq is a matchup problem for anybody. So,
right.
I could see anybody, stating that Sadiq is
He's the guy.
The guy.
Which is interesting, though, because he only has 9 catches on the season, a couple touchdowns. Whenever he's touched the ball, he's been just unbelievable. But he hasn't necessarily been this guy that's been like a Brock Bowers, where he's like the focal point of the offense. But maybe that is the not showing of the hand over the first 4 games of like, hey, this is a guy that we know is going to show up for us and maybe be more of a focal point against these teams. But we don't want to show that early on. But I think that there's more in store for Kenyon Sadiq.
Well, one of the things that I saw from watching the games is how when he wasn't the one catching the ball, he was still involved. He was blocking downfield. He was making, he was freeing up the receiver or whoever had the ball to make an even bigger gain. Now, there was one block that he really missed badly, but I won't get into that. But for the most part, it wasn't just when he had the ball.
Right.
It was the things he was doing when others had the ball that also made a huge impact.
No, and to me, that's the most impressive thing about him. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say he's the best blocker for his position, but I mean, he makes blocking look fun.
He's a man among boys. He
crazy.
really is.
No, and this is a game where the trenches, right? I mean, you talk about a team in the Big Ten, where when you talk about the Big Ten, you talk about the teams that are the teams that have the most in the trenches, NFL guys. I mean, Abdul Carter last year, Micah Parsons is another guy that went to Penn State. I mean, they have dudes. So offensive line, that blocking is going to be critical.
Absolutely. In fact, you look at Penn State against, their opponents so far this season, and their average per play is double. They have a 6.4 yards average per play on offense to their opponent's 3.6. Again, getting back to, we don't know if they've really played too much as far as a quality opponent, but to be considered an elite team, you need to dominate these early games, just like both teams have.
And I've got some early numbers that I want to share. Just like you said, these are kind of with a grain of salt.
Yep.
But I think that they do say something. So offensively, they're averaging 40 points a game, which is 18th in the nation. They're getting about 450 yards a game, which is 37th. I'm actually surprised they're 88th in the nation in third down conversion rate. So that's actually not super impressive. Like they're 36%. So maybe that's somewhere if you can get the Penn State into a third and long. They've had a little bit more trouble converting on third downs than other teams. They're top 30 in the nation in yards per rush. They're top 50 in yards per game. So they're a really good offensive team. I'm not sure if they're more explosive than they are just really effective, though, if that makes sense.
Well, getting back to what you mentioned about third down conversions, I just noticed their fourth down conversions, they're 5 for 8 on fourth down. So they won't let a third down necessarily stop them.
They're the type of team that if they have a 3rd and 8, it almost makes as much sense for them to run the ball to get it to a 4th and 3, where they have those backs where they can. I mean, Drew Aller can move. I definitely wouldn't expect them to just get to a third down and long and go, well, this drive's over.
And again, they're at home. It's going to be a slower playing surface. Physicality is going to be even that much more important because the speed is going to be not necessarily nullified, but it's going to be mitigated to a small degree because it's going to be harder to plant that foot and cut.
Right. A couple other really notable numbers from the defense. So they're first in the nation for opposing points per game. They average 5.5 points per game for their opponents. They're also top 10 in yards. But the ones that are really interesting to me are red zone scoring, they're only allowing points 50% of opponents' red zone possessions. That's incredible. I mean, a lot of teams are going to be in the high 70s and 80s. I mean, I'm sure they will be much closer to that throughout the year, but that means that teams are getting into the red zone within the 20 and sometimes not even getting a field goal. So I think that just goes to show that those 20s, in between the 20s, it's going to be tough for Oregon to get a score even if they get there.
Yeah, only 2 red zone touchdowns allowed so far this season.
That's crazy. I mean, I know the teams that they've played.
Right,
but
that's still pretty doggone good.
And they only allow 3.1 yards carry. Of course, the Ducks have been running the ball really well this season. But I think the trenches are pretty much, to me, what I think are going to decide the game. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that's about right. But and I think, unlike years past, until the Dan Lanning, late Cristobal, early Dan Lanning era, like they just haven't had the dudes until now.
Yeah. No, and they certainly do now.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of, who's going to get the better leverage on that turf.
Well, let's hear, while we have a little bit of time here, some thoughts from Dan Lanning on Penn State from his press conference last night. Got his first opportunity to hear about Penn State finally. I know that he's been asked about Penn State for a long time.
Won't talk about it.
And now we can finally talk about it.
Well, certainly excited for this one. I know you guys have been thinking about this one for a long time, and now we finally can focus on it as well. I mean, Penn State is extremely talented team. They do it well in all 3 phases. Coach Franklin runs a great organization, and they present a ton of challenges. I've said it before, but defensively, there's multiple and disruptive as anybody will play. They got great edge play. Denai Dennis-Sutton is one of the better defensive edge players in the league and in the nation. They've got good play in the back end as well. They do a great job overlapping and have a lot of variety of schemes. Offensively, they're really tough to prepare for because they're moving almost every play. So it just presents a really challenge, just the shifts and movements and motions that they do, and have great running backs, good quarterback, and their wide receiver play is really stands out this year. They have some speed on the field, and then special teams are really sound. So excited for that environment. It's one that I haven't been to before, but have heard a lot about.
And I think it was really interesting because he used the same verbiage that James Franklin did talking about Oregon's offense. He said they're multiple. And I think that's really interesting because I think one of the things that it's very clear that Dan Lanning has respect for this Penn State program is James Franklin's adaptability over the course of his time there since 2014.
Yeah, when you win like he's won, I mean, he did it at Vanderbilt. He's done it at Penn State. He's had a lot of success. He's had coordinator changes and still been able to have success. They've adapted with times. I think they're one of the better teams in utilizing the personnel they have. You saw what their attack looked like last year with Tyler Warren. Now what their attack looks like this year with their backs, with their quarterback, schematically on defense, willingness to change and adapt. I think there's been a lot of variety that he's shown over the years and ability to win.
So Oregon meets Penn State last year in the Big Ten championship game. Mm-hmm. They win 45-37.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, Woody, how close and how much should we consider what last game was this year? Like, does it matter? Are these 2 different completely teams? I mean, Penn State has a lot of guys that were back on that team. So does that translate to this season? I'm not sure.
Yeah, with college, you have turnover every year. If it were the pros, it would have said, yeah, it would matter. But with college, Oregon has a new quarterback, plays different than the last quarterback. Oregon has new weapons. Oregon has new guys on the offensive line. Penn State, the same, So if everybody's running the exact same scheme that they faced last year, then I think it'll be a factor because you have a better idea of what to expect.
Right.
But I don't think it's necessarily like, because this happened last year, this is absolutely the way it's going to be this year.
Well, let's hear Dan Lanning's take on that.
You assess what was good and bad from last season. You recognize where they've changed and what they've adjusted, knowing they've made some changes. They have different personnel in some spots, and then, same with us. But it's a combination of both.
And one of those spots that I think they definitely made some changes to is their receiving core. It seems like that's a place that they targeted, especially in the portal, brought in a couple guys, Kyron Hudson and Trevin Pena, who were productive at smaller schools, got 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, things of those nature. So it's a position where Penn State typically, when you talk about this offense, it's going to be a weak point. And so I think that's somewhere where I'm going to be really interested to see how much that actually translates against Oregon. Some guys that theoretically have some more speed that could add to this already really effective run game, right?
I still think Oregon has more team speed
absolutely.
and more depth.
Absolutely.
But that, again, I think that the conditions are going to depend on, how tall that grass is.
Right.
Come on Saturday.
Right. The groundskeeper is definitely going to be important.
Yeah, it could be the MVP of the week.
Yes. Well, here's Dan Lanning, though, talking about the passing attack for the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I mean they have some guys that can stretch the field. They run good routes, and the quarterback can make all the throws. He's got a big arm. They throw more intermediate passing game and shot game than we've really seen, and that's one of the great compliments to their run game. Is what they're able to build off of that run game with shots down the field. So they have the guys that can go get it. They have the guy that can go throw it.
And it just depends on whether or not Oregon has the guys to get after him to make him throw it when he doesn't want to.
Right. And I think they have the guys. I mean, I think that's where it becomes really interesting, right? Matchups like this is where it feels like it's all about the coaching, right? Because the pieces are all there for both teams. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's about how can you get that little advantage to get that one guy free or to make one coverage blow on defense. You know what I mean? It's just like going to come down to those little things, right? I mean, are we expecting this to be I don't know what the lines are or the over-under, but is this supposed to be a lower scoring game, or do you think this could turn into what it was last year?
I didn't see the over-under, but the line itself has moved to now Penn State favored by 4.
So it's like it was 3.5, right?
No, it's 3. It
was
opened
3?
at 3.
Okay.
Now it's all the way up to 4.
That makes sense. I mean,
so yeah, it's home field advantage. It's a nighttime. A good chunk of this Oregon team has not played in this type of a situation.
Right.
Now a good chunk of them have, but you have a lot younger depth of team this year compared to the senior leadership that they had last year.
Absolutely.
And I think you want guys that aren't looking around at the lights and the atmosphere going, oh, this is cool. You want guys that are focused on what's happening on the field.
Right. And I think that one guy you need to turn to in this situation is Dan Lanning, who has been in a lot of big games. And I think that he finally shed the moniker of can't win the big one as against Penn State last year, right?
Right.
Yeah. So certainly a game that I think that everybody is ready for. It's going to be fun to have one of these games on the road. Obviously, Autzen Stadium was super great having Ohio State come to town, but I am interested. This is one of the things that I was interested to see about the Ducks in the Big Ten is going on the road and going to these big environments. Last year, the big test was at Camp Randall at Wisconsin. It was a big test for them. So I am really interested to see how they handle the environment, especially a guy like Dante Moore, really inexperienced for the most part, getting to play in front of as many fans as there's going to be there.
I'm not too worried about the quarterback position. I think Dante can handle it. It's Decarian Moore.
Decorian, yeah.
Decorian, I said Decarian. Sorry. You guys, you've got guys that haven't been in those big lights, and this is going to be the real test.
It is going to be a real test, but it's going to be a fun one, and we're going to learn a lot about this Oregon team, I think.
Absolutely.
Which is going to be great because I think they're really good.
I do too.
But it'd be nice to know if they are. Certainly, perception is reality in this sport as well, and it's going to be a huge game just in terms of how people think about the Ducks. But we're going to take our first break here on the Danny and Justin Show. When we come back, Ryan Harlan from Beavers Edge will join us here to talk about Houston. They're coming to town on Friday night, so we're going to talk about that game, and the students are going to finally be in the stands. We'll have him on next after this break. You're listening to Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport. Back in the Bigfoot Beverages studios, the Danny and Justin radio program on Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport. So Oregon isn't the only one with a big game this weekend. The Beavers have a huge Friday night game this week on ESPN. It's a nationally televised game. Joining me on the Oregon Man Clinics hotline to talk about that game is senior sports writer covering Oregon State athletics for Beavers Edge and On 3 Sports affiliate. Before we get to that game, Ryan, I want your thoughts as we wrap up the 129th Civil War. Are you glad that game's just over now that these two teams can just kind of go their separate ways for a couple years?
Yeah, I would say that, kind of going into this, there wasn't really a lot of excitement for this game. The energy wasn't there. The stakes weren't there. It's, you're not playing it at the end of the year anymore. You're playing it in week 4 in September when really the season still doesn't mean much in the way of anything. And it's one of those where the disparity is there in terms of where these two teams are at right now and the levels that they are at. And to me, I'm kind of glad that at least it's done for right now, for at least for the next 2 years. But I think, for kind of going forward, because we know that this rivalry is going to extend to 2032.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to, as a collective, from the fan side of things, the reporter side of things, and kind of just looking at this at all, this rivalry does not mean the same anymore in today's college football landscape. And I think we need to, stop pretending that it still holds that, because clearly, it from the play on the field on Saturday, it just didn't look like, how things were, in 2023, 2022, and so on, where there was actually, level playing fields now. Because I think it was a little bit of nostalgia service where you could really just more look back on and be like, oh yeah, remember this time, remember the 19 straight runs, so on and so forth, right? Like, it just doesn't hold that same meaning anymore. And the fact that, when the series does resume, it picks up back at Autzen again, I think that's also kind of a slap in the face from the Oregon State side of things, from Scott Barnes, side of things, of not being able to get the game to at least resume back in Reeser on, the years when both Oregon and Oregon State traditionally, host the game at their own stadium. So I'm kind of glad, yes, it gives, kind of, at least maybe we'll see what my excitement level for it is, in 2 years' time. But I know kind of coming into it, I was kind of like, what happened on Saturday was what I expected, pretty much.
Ryan Harlan from Beavers Edge with us on the Danny and Justin radio program. 2 years of a break, and then they're going to play for a 5-year period. Do you think that there's any chance that this game gets more competitive by the end of that stretch? Or do you think this is just one of those things where it's just not easy for these two teams to be, and programs to be competitive at this point?
At least for when you get to the later part of the deal, right, maybe things might get a little bit more competitive, because anything can kind of happen. But I think for the foreseeable future, as long as Dan Lanning is still there at Oregon, and Oregon is what it will continue to be with Phil Knight as well, and his money that he's earned over at Nike, and kind of where Oregon State is kind of at right now, and see where they are at post, reconstruction of this Pac-12 conference in 2026 and beyond. I mean, maybe, these first couple of years aren't going to be quite competitive, but going further down the line, I think it's going to be a little bit more, up in the air at that point. It's not to say I don't think it could ever be competitive, mm-hmm. but I think, there needs to be that sort of interest of this game still means something, because if you still hold it in September, right. I think you still kind of lose that a little bit. If USC and Notre Dame can make it work of playing at the end of the year, why not try and, have that game get pushed back to the end of the year, where it actually would mean something, and the stakes are a little bit higher than versus, kind of in this non-conference slate at the earlier part of the season, where we don't really know, what a team is 3-4 games into the year.
And it's honestly a tough question to answer. I mean, you can't read the future. We don't know how these things are going to develop. This new Pac-12 conference, obviously there's a lot of hope and excitement for it, but we truly just don't know how these things are going to gel together. Nobody thought the original Pac-12 was going to dissipate. So I obviously think that there's a lot that just is a mystery as we go forward. Do want to talk about this actual Civil War 129 Civil War game. First quarter, it was much, much closer than the rest of the game. I believe the yardage was 126 or 5 yards for Oregon to 76. We talked about this a little before our interview, so I kind of think I know what your feelings are going to be about it. But how much do you think we can take away from that? Because it really was one of the more competitive quarters that Oregon's had so far this season. But obviously, you have to play 4 quarters in a game.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. And I don't think, if you're Trent Bray, you hold, that kind of as a moral victory, despite, what he said post game. But I mean, the effort was there on defense, which was clearly lacking the week before against Texas Tech. And I also think too, on top of that, Oregon, I think, played some of their most kind of sloppiest football that I've seen so far, because when you look at the penalty yardage as well, too, I mean, Oregon State only committed 2 penalties for 10 yards, and Oregon had 5 for 40. So it's like you would take that any day of the week. But at the same time, though, it just was like they're not. This team still hasn't been able to show consistency through 4 quarters, and I mean the offense didn't really do, favors for at least for that kind of first half where things kind of got away from them. I mean, you also gave up 600 yards on offense to the Ducks too, so. Defensively they could only do so much before I think the floodgates opened, but Malik Murphy had his worst performance of not only his college career, but also in an Oregon State uniform. And like certain other things I think also improved too, like the long snapping issues, which is kind of the bare minimum, right? But like you also whiff on the fake punt there where James Ferguson Reynolds just had a wide open lane, and the fact that he said it wasn't, and it wasn't planned either, was something that kind of is even more head scratching that you weren't able to get, hats to hats and prevent that wide open lane for him. So yeah, there was some more positives. I don't necessarily, look at that and be like, okay, this is, what this team can be. It's just, I need to see like 4 quarters of, just this team playing their best football and coming out with that sense of urgency of like, this is what we can be and this is what we need to be right now, because winning cures all in this case. And if the Beavers, aren't able to win on Friday, I think it's going to be a really tough ask of this team to try and get their first win of the season on the road 3,000 miles away in Boone, North Carolina.
Ryan, Woody here. At the beginning of the season, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of talk about this Beavers roster and how, there was expected to see a major improvement and challenge for a bowl game and possibly even a really good bowl game. And then we've had these first 4 games. What, in your opinion, what do you see is a root cause? Or do you see a root cause here? How have they fallen off so hard compared to what there was such optimism at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, that optimism, I think I played a role in it, and so did a lot of other Oregon State media members watching this team in practice, because we get a nice, front row seat to watching the Beavers practice for those that don't attend Oregon State practices. So we get to see all of it. And from what we saw, we expected at least, a 7-8 win team, somewhere around there, where like that's what they showed in practice. But the disconnect, I think, through these first 4 games is it's not taking practice into a game environment. And I think the frustrations are there from this group. Like Van Wells has even said too, like he doesn't even quite understand why, like, what their preparation every single week is not translating in game. And I think for at least the root cause of things, there are many different avenues that you can point, but at least offensively, the offensive line in terms of just run blocking has not been what it's been in previous years. Like Oregon State, the one thing that you can expect year in, year out is a strong running game, and that hasn't been going at all. And really it's an issue of guys just not finishing blocks, just the experience along that offensive line. And I think it's, guys sometimes trying to do too much as well too, and not trusting themselves in the system or anything like that, and just going out there and playing loose. Some of that I think is coaching a little bit with kind of how week 1 shaped up against Cal. Fresno State, you should have won that game with those special teams issues that caused you to not win. I don't think anybody was really expecting, wins against Texas Tech and Oregon. I had those 2 penciled in as losses kind of going in, but like the biggest thing was like, okay, try not to get run off the field basically for those 2 games, and then, get into the easier part of your schedule and, run the table essentially. But like, I think it's a multitude of things, but I really do think that like this is not the practice is not translating to game environment. Whatever they're doing is just not like coming over. And like from somebody that was a former athlete in high school, like the way you practice should be the way that you treat the game. And I don't think it's, necessarily those things are kind of happening in that moment for this group right now, because this team has the talent clearly on paper to be an 7-8 win team. But like, it's, more of, you got to play the games and you got to, basically do it as like any given Saturday, any given Friday in the case of Houston. So treat it like that. But I think we would have a different conversation about this if this team was, kind of 1-3 type of deal, right, rather than 0-4, because at least, with Fresno, you're like, okay, you won that game. Like, you were supposed to win that, but it's, I really do think it's just a disconnect from practice to the actual game environment itself. And there's a lot of things you can point to as to what that cause is. But I think, you go from the top down, and that starts with coaching and the buck stopping with Trent Bray.
Ryan Harlan is with us here on the Danny and Justin radio program, Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport. He's the senior sports writer covering Oregon State athletics for Beavers Edge. And one of the biggest surprises to me, Ryan, is the fact that it seems like Malik Murphy is regressing. I mean, he was a really solid quarterback for Duke last year, led them to a solid number of wins, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I mean, we hear all about the arm, and it just seems like something's going on. Do you think they're utilizing him incorrectly? Like, what's going on here with Malik?
So it's funny you mentioned that, because Malik was asked about that post game, and he said I'm not utilizing my skill sets correctly in this offense. So I think it's kind of a bit of both, to be quite honest with you. I mean, we saw some flashes against Fresno of what this offense can be, but also I think too, for why Malik has struggled to the degree that he has, is the offensive line is not, they're not doing him any favors in terms of establishing a run game to take off some of that pressure from him from trying to do too much, because Ray even said post game against Oregon that Malik was trying to do too much, and that's not his job as the quarterback of this team. But also I think part of it is there is this Oregon State offense, we've seen it through 2 years. It's not really clear what this offense wants to be. I know Gundy had said when we first talked to him in spring football that first year that he wants to deliver a fun offense, but we haven't gotten an idea of what that is or what that looks like. And I don't think that there's a lot of like successful offensive identity that goes to what these players can be in this system, because they're not being utilized, I think, in their best manner. And also, too, the tight ends aren't really that involved. Caulfield has kind of been used sparingly, quarterback's best friend. Wide receivers outside of Trent Walker haven't really shown much. Taz Reddick's had a really good game against Fresno, but it's kind of what it was before Malik Murphy came in, where really your only option in the receiver room to throw to is Trent Walker. So somebody needs to step up outside of him and make this kind of maybe a committee approach. But I think it's play calling, and I think also too, it's the offensive line itself, and trying to take some of that pressure off of Murphy and establish the run. And then I think just guys not being, utilized correctly in this system either, to where you can see a lot more, I would say, success. But there needs to be improvement from not only Murphy, but also I think from Ryan Gunderson in terms of establishing what he wants to do offensively to attack Houston and stick with that game plan, or simplify down his approach of however he's deciding to call plays, a la, Will Stein basically. So that's also something there where I think, maybe if you combine those two, you might see maybe a little more success on Friday. But I think it starts with both Murphy and Gunderson going back to the drawing board and trying to find something that works, that utilizes everybody's skill set there on offense to the best that they can.
Ryan, could part of the problem be that you've got a lot of guys still there that are used to Jonathan Smith's system and they just don't fit what the new coaching staff is trying to do?
I would say that for some of those guys, there's not a whole lot of holdover in that room. There's some guys that were there for Jonathan's tenure, but I think it's just there's no identity on offense. That's what I think is the main issue, because if Oregon State can't run the ball, right, and that's usually what you expect out of an Oregon State team, if they can't run the ball, the Beavers can't run the ball, then they're one-dimensional, and the passing attack is bland, vanilla. It's not, something that makes opposing defenses scared to defend because they know Trent Walker is the main option. Okay, beat us with somebody else outside of Trent Walker. I think that's part of it. As well. And I think maybe it might just be the scheme itself and guys maybe not, necessarily fitting into that and maybe having more success with what Brian Lindgren and Jonathan Smith were able to do in their tenure here. But I think it's just really no clear offensive identity from Ryan Gunderson in year 2 that I think is kind of leading to some of these struggles, because if there was a clear identity, if you turn on an Oregon State game and be like, okay, this team wants to do X, Y, and Z, right? I think that's something there where this would be maybe a little bit looked at differently if there was that clear identity. But the fact that there's not is pretty glaring in year 2. And I know Ray doesn't want to touch that side of the ball and leave that to Gundy, but I think Gundy needs to make that clear as to what this is, and not only help those skill positions out, but also help out his quarterback and make it easier to get him into a rhythm and be able to, establish some sort of offensive game plan against Houston for Friday.
And there's plenty of meat on the bone this season, a lot of time left, but remains to be seen if the Beavers will be able to turn around. They have a tough test against Houston. Follow him on Twitter at Ryan_Harlan7 and his written work for Beavers Edge. Ryan, thanks for being here. As always, at the drop of the hat, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
We're going to take another break here on the Danny and Justin radio program. Up next on Danny and Justin, we're going to dive a little more into Oregon State and hear from Trent Bray. We're going to hear from the horse's mouth.
There we go.
My favorite statement, I guess. We'll preview Houston and what they do heading into this game. And if we have time, I want to give my thoughts on some big news in Major League Baseball.
Uh-oh.
We'll see what happens. I'm not sure we'll have time, but
you're going to be talking
we'll
Cubs
try.
again.
No Cubs or Packers today.
All right.
You're listening to the Danny and Justin Show on Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport.
Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport are your home for Justin Herbert, Troy Dye, Jamari Caldwell, Nico Reed, and LA Chargers football. This week, the Chargers take on Kayvon Thibodeau and the New York Giants. Pre-game coverage starts at 9 a.m. Chargers-Giants this Sunday on Fox Sports Eugene and Fox Sports Newport.
Pretty good this year.
Yeah. I'll take 3-0.
Yeah, against divisional opponents.
Yes.
Too. Big win against Bo Nix. A little bit unfortunate there, some duck-on-duck crime. But that was the first game, or the first weekend, I should say. I think I'm getting the stat right, that there were 3 starting quarterbacks that were all Oregon Ducks.
Marcus, Bo, and Justin.
So some fun.
And so out of no fault of anybody's own, they wound up being 2-1 just because 2 of them played each other.
Right. No, but both of those teams looking really good. I mean, obviously divisional opponents, so they're going to play each other a decent amount if they're on those teams in their careers.
And Denver was screwed the week before on that call on the field goal.
Yes. No,
so they should be 2-1.
What was that? The leverage call?
Yep, leverage.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I don't like that call.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
It was the battle of the the horses in that one. The Colts are like good, I guess. Like, I don't know.
Who knew Daniel Jones would do something in Baltimore?
Listen,
not Baltimore. In Indianapolis.
Well, it's the old Baltimore Colts, right? But no, it's been an interesting start to the NFL season. Want to thank Ryan Harlan for joining us once again. Yeah, he always does a great job as he previewed and helped us preview Oregon State and Houston coming up this Friday night. We have a couple of minutes here. I want to get into a couple stats for Houston because they're a really good team, by the way. I mean, Oregon and Texas Tech were really good teams, but it's a team that averages 36 points per game. It's top 30 in the country, and they are also really, really good on defense. Only allowing 14.5 points per game, top 15 in yards per game as well, third down percentage, and their yards per carry as well is under 4. So this is a really, really solid team defensively and with a lot of playmakers offensively. So I don't know. This just might be too tough of a test once again for the Beavers.
Well, they manhandled Colorado pretty well.
They did. I mean, that's a better opponent than Penn State faced.
Well, it's a better opponent than Oregon's faced.
Absolutely, and they looked really good.
Yeah.
No, and their sack percentage is 11%, which means that on 11% of their plays, they're getting a sack. So that's very high up in the nation. But yeah, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this team moves forward. So Trent Bray talks about how they are planning to move forward.
Yeah, I've kind of said it. They've been great as far as the way they come out to work, the way they show up to meetings. There's no one's pouting or hanging their head or anything like that. So I feel good about the work they're doing. Just we understand. We've done some things self-destruction wise that have led to our situation. So we're part of that. We got to fix that, continue to improve in that, and then really build off that first half of Oregon. I said it after the game, but you're right there with that team. That's one of the top teams in the country. That's what we're capable of doing, and we got to do it for 4 quarters.
And one interesting thing that Trent Bray was asked is that, at Houston, are they a different type of offense than you faced in Texas Tech and Oregon? No.
It's very similar to what we've seen the last 2 weeks, from Tech and from Oregon, both offensively and defensively. So there's some carryover and things we've seen and learned from against those two teams that should hopefully help us on Friday.
Well, and what's one of those things that they're going to need to do? Because Houston is a really good team. Connor Wegman, 4 touchdowns so far this season, no interceptions, but he's also a running threat as well. He has 3 touchdowns on the ground, averages over 4 yards a carry. As a team, they're just really solid. Their running back, Connors, is a guy that's a little bit bigger for a back. He's got some push to him, but he's also shifty. He averages over 5 yards a carry, and they've got speed at wide receiver. So if you're Trent Bray, what do you want to do to help contain this offense?
You got to do a good job keeping him in the pocket because he's a good athlete, and he's hurt teams by getting out and running. Can't allow that to be a factor. When they drop back to pass, we got to keep him in there and give our secondary a chance to work.
And they had a hard time doing that against Dante Moore, who, I don't know if you remember this, but that first half, near the end of the first quarter in that 2-minute drill, he had a big scramble out there, and that helped Oregon get some more points at the end of the half.
And it was, again, it's just the bodies, it's the team speed, it's the overall depth that they had to face that was the deciding factor.
Well, we have something special for our audience. Sounds like you have a dad joke.
Okay, let's do it.
Oh, a joke!
I got fired from the bank today. A woman asked me to check her balance, so I pushed her.
Dad jokes!
Okay, first I have to say I stole this from Willackenzie Animal Clinic on their reader board.
All right.
So, are mountains funny?
I don't know.
They're hilarious.
Oh, hilarious.
Hilarious.
Yes, hilarious. I mean, that's about the Danny standard, I'd say. I think that's the standard he set. No, it was good. I liked it. It was fun hanging out with you today on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you giving your thoughts on both of these games. Man, it's going to be a fun one this weekend.
Yep.
Hopefully be a fun one up at Corvallis as well. We'll have a fun show tomorrow. We're going to have Steve Mims in again. We'll have Carrie Eggers as well, and as well as Audrey Snyder formerly from The Athletic. Put a smile on your face and someone else's face. They deserve it. So do you. Thanks for listening. We'll be back after this 23-hour break. Peace.